When kicking off your Amazon advertising strategies in Q1, there is one thing that you need to make sure that you're always getting correct, and that is how you are doing your budgeting and bidding strategies and what the purpose behind them is. So, if you are trying to have a certain function coming into the new year with Q1 in your advertising, one thing I would always say you should really hone in on is your budget. Now, budget is a very subjective thing on Amazon, but is one of those areas that, depending on what you're trying to do on the platform, is fairly simple to get done. So let's dig in and figure out exactly what you should be looking at when doing your budget on Amazon. First and foremost, always look at how you're aligning your overall PPC goals with also your business goals. What is your business goal on Amazon in Q1? Are you trying to have more of a brand awareness, like I've previously talked about being the big thing for 2025? Or are you just trying to launch a new product in Q1, which is always a very common thing that people are trying to do. They want to get in early in the beginning of the year, get a full 12 months in. So you could be looking either at one of those, or maybe 2024 had great sales volume, but you weren't all that profitable. All of these different things have different ways of going about them. So let's say that, for instance, the brand awareness, you should be looking at doing a little bit more of a broad match campaigns. You should do some brand targeting campaigns as well, and your self-targeting campaigns. With that as well, you should really focus on high impression to get your brand out there. Try and make sure that people are actually seeing your brand, as well as using things such as sponsored brand campaigns that will really help you understand what the target market sees your brand as. This also will help you in the long run have more brand awareness and actually build a brand and a story brand on Amazon. Secondly, we have product launch. Product launch is very different comparatively to brand awareness. Product launch, you're trying to essentially get as many sales in as quickly as possible. This is type thing where you should look at targeting very specific keywords that are highly relevant to your product through things such as sponsored products and sponsored brands to try and make sure that your product launch goes as quickly and efficiently as possible. I would also typically say for these that you should be focused on exact campaigns and phrase campaigns. Broad is not exactly the best type of campaign when it comes to a product launch. So therefore, if you are looking at launching a new product, really make sure you're getting your auto campaigns for some gold panning, figure out what your keywords are, really try and get some relevant high impression keywords in there that you can just immediately start getting and capitalizing on some sales. And also ensure that your strategy as far as getting your overall product seen in front of people isn't just going to break the bank. So don't always just focus on top of search. Rest of search is totally fine, and also competitor targeting as well. Let's think about profitability. Are you just trying in 2025 to be as profitable as possible? It's always something that people have on the back of their minds as a business, right? You want to try and increase your profitability as high as you possibly can. So if that is you and you are trying in Q1 to start that trend of being a little bit more profitable, really dig in, see what are your highest converting but lowest cost per click keywords, and really focus only on those. If you're really just trying to be profitable, what I'm always going to suggest is lower what your overall typical average ACoS goal is by about 10%, and then only focus on keywords that are relatively around that area. I typically say anywhere between 5 and 10% outside of what your ACoS goal is going to be where you really are going to see the sweet spot in the cost per click and high relevancy keywords. So absolutely, if you're looking at more profitability, just lower that ACoS goal. I'm always also going to say, as long as your tacos is at a very consistent level, advertising isn't as important how much you spend. So be very mindful of what you are spending overall on your advertising comparatively to your organic. Make sure that you're not going to be cannibalizing any of your actual organic sales through your advertising either. It's one of the things that I see people do so frequently that ends up biting them in the butt when it comes to profitability. And then finally, we want to set clear KPIs for each of these. For brand awareness, track impressions. Try and see what your overall CTR is going to be for the entirety of the campaign. You don't want to focus too much on the idea of conversion if your entire idea is getting your brand out there in front of people, right? So track your impressions, track your click-through rate for those. And then for things such as your product launch, you really are focused on that sales volume. You want to track your conversion rate. You want to track what your cost per click is and your customer acquisition cost. These are things that are really going to show you how viable this product is going to be down the line. It's going to show you whether or not this product launch is going to be something that does really well now, but isn't going to do well in the future, or how really profitable and feasible it is to keep this product going long term. And then for profitability, really focus again on the tacos and the ROAS. These are things that are going to really help you and understand where your actual product is as far as a cost per click goes on all of your keywords, and how much you're going to actually really be able to juice all of that profitability out of the product. So really hone in on your ROAS, your tacos, and your cost per click. It helps to understand what your general market looks like, because something where you have a cost per click for 25 cents in an average category versus even some supplements, for instance, it's $50. So that's one of the things you always want to make sure you understand what the general idea of your cost per click for your extremely high relevancy keywords is going to be. Once you figure out which one of these three areas you're really focused on, the next thing you really need to dig into is your budget. Budgeting on advertising on Amazon, especially in Q1, is something you really should be evaluating for not just Q1, but all of 2025. This is one of those things where you have to take a look back at what you were spending in 2024, see where your sales volume was at, and see, is it make sense to add a little bit more budget this time around? Are you seeing that you're getting enough organic traffic now to where your advertising can just free flow without necessarily impacting your tacos overall? These are things that you have to look at. So I'm always going to advise people when they figure out which one of these, awareness, profitability, product launch, whichever one you're going after, reassess your budget based on each one of those. For things such as a brand awareness, you're probably going to have a little bit more of an allocated budget for specifically that. Whereas product launch, you really want to have a higher budget overall that's going to help you understand and actually get your product out there. Now, when you are doing this, I also will heavily advise looking both at your monthly, weekly, but also daily budgets. The biggest thing I will always say is do not necessarily limit yourself to an account-wide daily budget cap. This is one of the areas where you're really going to miss out on a lot of things. I'm always going to advise that you look on a weekly basis, if anything, because weekly is really going to tell you what monthly is going to be. But there are some days where you're necessarily going to spend maybe $50 and other days where you're going to spend $200. So as long as you're somewhere within the realm where you're supposed to be for a weekly, then typically you will be for also your monthly budget. But daily budget is one of those that can wildly differ a little too much. So I wouldn't necessarily cap your entire account on a typical daily budget, no matter what your goal is outside of profitability. Profitability is the one area where if you really need to be a certain profit metric, then yes, a daily budget makes a little bit more sense, but make sure it's not too low so that you're still able to capitalize on, these sales that you typically would get anyhow. Once you have a better idea of what your overall daily budget for things like profitability and your weekly and monthly budgets for brand awareness and product launch should be, something I will say is look back at it at least once per week. One of the things that people so often do, especially towards the beginning of the year when there's not as much traffic and sales volume, is they don't typically reassess what their budget should be. This is something I'm always going to advise people to do, of reassess very frequently what your budget should be. If you are seeing really good ROAS and you are seeing really good cost per click, do not let your budget be the thing that limits you from continuing to grow your product and your brand. So reassess your budget at least once per week to see whether or not it makes sense to increase and allocate more towards certain campaigns, towards certain keywords, or even just as an account level at a whole. So this is one of the biggest things that I see people a little fearful of, adding an extra $1,000 a month. That can be a very fearful and big thing to do. Just make sure if you are going to go forward with it, that you look and make sure that all of your metrics are actually where they should be. So if you, for instance, are seeing that your brand awareness campaign is performing amazingly and your overall organic growth is growing hugely from that brand awareness strategy that you are implementing, that's one of those things where maybe it makes sense to add a little bit more budget to it, even though it should be relatively a lower high impression budget. So these are the type of things that you need to think about when you're overall looking at but also a monthly strategy as well. Finally, when looking at your budget, plan for some seasonality. You should always know what your product is, what season your product typically is going to be a part of. If you're a supplement product, you're probably doing a lot more in Q1 than you are in Q4. This is totally normal. This is just what you're supposed to see happen typically this time of year. But if you're a product that, let's say, is meant for Thanksgiving or Christmas, you're probably not going to see as much of a need for a high budget during Q1 as you would Q4. So always assess your seasonality of your product. It's every single product on Amazon, bar a few, have some form of seasonality in some way, shape, or form. As long as you're not selling something like paper towels, you're probably still going to have some seasonality. Even then, you're probably going to have at least something where, let's say, 4th of July, I bet paper towels spike. So assess seasonality on your product. Make sure that whatever your budget is set at, that you're doing it in anticipation of your season. Is Q1 your season? Is Q2 your season where you see high sales growth? These are things where you can also relook at what you're expecting from a year or a month over month with your budget as well. So look at that and assess for your seasonality as far as what your budget should. Amazon PPC success starts with one thing and one thing only: a solid plan. And that's exactly what we covered today. Whether you're going for brand awareness, profitability, or a new product launch, or you're just trying to understand what your budget should be for each one of your different months and quarters, that's how your plan starts. And that's exactly what you should focus on in Q1, is getting a really, really good handle and grasp on your overall PPC plan to maximize what PPC is doing for you. So hopefully after all of this, you have a little bit better knowledge on how you should be looking at your budgets, what you should be trying to target depending on what your overall plan for 2025 is, and especially looking at how Q1 can affect things even as simple as seasonality down the line. If you liked this video, please go ahead, give it a thumbs up, subscribe down below, and leave us a comment if there's something you want to see us cover. We're going to be putting out way more videos all about PPC and a ton of other topics here soon. We release content nearly every single day. So hopefully you'll stick around, and we'll see you next time.